What's good? In September last year, my community very kindly contributed towards a subscriber goal to complete Final Fantasy IX entirely blindfolded, while in blank cosplay. Now you may be wondering, how do you Final Fantasy blindfolded? And the answer is quite simple. Have the biggest brain known to man. The route I followed is almost exactly the same as my speedrun route, with just a few small adjustments for consistency's sake. This means every time I go to equip my characters, it will be the same menu and all of my consumables will be managed throughout the run. As for combat, characters are identifiable based on how many pages their unique actions have. For example, Zidane has steel underneath attack, and pressing R1 yields no sound effects, whereas Vivi has 5 pages in his black magic list. The only characters with any overlap here are Zidane and Freya, who have a single target ability underneath attack and a 2-page action underneath that. Fortunately, their selectable abilities are never exactly the same, and they can be identified based on what abilities can or can't be used. Moving through screens is managed by the sound of footsteps. Final Fantasy IX came out in glorious stereo sound, so I soon became very acquainted with Zidane's footsteps. Some screens required setups to navigate, but most of them were simple enough. The final major hurdle was getting across the world map. On foot, a number of setups were created, with airships and the Blue Narcissus using the metronome to measure distances and turning angles. The most frustrating issue to deal with was loading into a world map save, as it would never yield the same camera angle, due to the random angle that the Moogle would come to talk to Zidane at. Resetting the camera by entering a location helps to remedy this, but isn't always possible. With that said, onto the run. On starting the run, first thing that needs to be done is to set up the configuration menu, allowing us to clear text a little bit quicker, and most importantly, increasing our RNG with the most important, crucial setting, blue text boxes. Now what's a good run without some custom names? So I'm going to make sure that we create some fitting names throughout the run. Next, we need to steal the Mage Masher from Massman. The Mage Masher is quite a powerful dagger that we can equip onto Zidane, and is going to help us deal with some more bosses and enemies a little bit quicker. Of course, thanks to the blue text boxes, we steal it really quickly, but the only issue is, I'm not aware of this, and continue to steal for another 50 attempts or so, just to make sure that we've got it. Moving through the next few screens is nice and easy. We make our way to naming view. Our play begins, and we have to do battle with King Leo. Attacking the brothers Bonero and Zanero first just helps save some time against watching their special effects moves, before mashing X and triangle in the noble minigame, making sure not to repeat it at the end. A quick navigation through the castle takes us to naming Steiner, and engaging in the first of 3 fights with him. The first we can simply hold it, whereas the second, we want to try and use Vivi's Fire Roll to dispatch the Knights of Pluto as soon as possible. The final fight with Steiner is completely on rails and ends after a set period, giving us a bit of free time. Coming out of the prologue, we enter the Evil Forest, where our blue text boxes continue to provide perfect speedrunning RNG, but less than ideal blindfolded RNG, so we make sure to force an encounter on this screen. Prison Cage 1 and 2 are completely on rails, and once again, blue text boxes provide and give us the Broadsword Steel to save us 660 gil and some menus in the future. Plant Brain goes down in 2 turns without too much trouble, and allows us to exit the Evil Forest for our first world map segment. A quick save on the map to make sure that we don't get lost, and it's on to Ice Cavern. I was counting experience on Zidane throughout and calculated I'd need to kill another encounter on Ice Cavern for level 4, but once again blue text boxes pulled through and gave us no encounters on the way through, so I had to force one again. The game instantly realised what I was doing and hard punished me with a back attack. Black Waltz 1 is the next boss, and despite having really good ATB, he still manages to sneak a turn in front of us. With a rough idea of how much the attacks do from both of these enemies, Black Waltz 1 goes down in just 3 attack, whereas Sea Lion goes down in 6, with a counter every other turn. I'm able to calculate damage in my head, and know when I need to push. As we exit the Ice Cavern, the game finally decides to give me all of the encounters it spared me in true FF9 fashion. We give Garnet a very topical name, shoutouts to Charlie's Amok Runner challenge over the new year. Dali is about as exciting as Dali ever is, but after a short shop and a really quick menu, we're able to move straight on to Black Waltz 2. Black Waltz 2 very kindly kills Vivi for us, giving us a fire skip, and even having the goodwill to provide us with a couple ethers when he dies. Black Waltz 3 is another fight with minimal variance, and of course with blue text boxes, it means that we get D-Trance skip, saving us a whole 7 seconds, putting us back onto world record pace. After a few cutscenes, Lindblum is mostly linear with a few quick shops, grabbing an echo screen to help normalise our inventory, ensuring there's at least one in our bag, back and the inventory can be on track. Then I finish my shopping in the weapon and synth shops and head back to the castle. I say mostly linear, as there was a slight hiccup on the way back to the hunt. Our next goal is to get to Gizmaluke's grotto. To get there, we're going to make a few stops, first off at Q's Marsh, then at Chocobo's forest to enable the Chocobo, and then taking the Chocobo straight to the grotto. Inside of the grotto, we have to do battle with 2 pairs of Black Mage soldiers. Zidane is tooled up to deal with them in one shot, allowing us to progress through and save before fighting against Gizmaluke. As for the Gizmaluke fight itself, we throw tents at him to blind and silent, which unfortunately don't stick the first try and force a reset. A few tries later, we get some tents to stick and Gizmaluke goes down. Bemisia is the final zone of Disc 1, so a quick stutter step south takes us straight there. Once we arrive, we have to deal with one more pair of Black Mages, which Zidane once again is able to take down in one hit. After a few screens in Bemisia, we're fighting against Beatrix. You can end Beatrix's fight by dealing damage, or by waiting 10 turns. We're not really set up to deal damage, so instead, I'll just throw a Phoenix down whenever I think someone's gone down, and end the fight that way. Finally, we found the end of Disc 1, and I take a short break. Disc 2 opens with a quick menu that I managed to get wrong, have to reload, and then correct. Shortly after, we get into a fight with Blackwatch 3-2, who fortunately accepts his fate without having to take Steiner down with him, giving him some much needed AP. Our visit to Treno has us pick up the power belt, along with another small shop, before we head down to Garganru. I take an extra fight down here to get a little bit more experience on Steiner, so he can tank a little bit more abuse. I very skillfully hold X against Baby Ralph, to send him running with his tail, or his body, between his body. We then rejoin our other party who are making their way up Clara. We take care of the Antlion boss with a few Blazzaras and enjoy one last moment of peace before the invasion begins. A series of fights with Alexandrian soldiers and more Black Mages, which Freya and Zidane can dispatch in one hit with the occasional Blazzara from Vivi, leaves us at the chapel ready to fight Beatrix 2. Before we can fight Beatrix 2 though, we have to do some very scary movement in the chapel. It's very important that I pick up all of the essential items from this room without picking up the hidden yellow scarf by the door. If the yellow scarf gets caught in my inventory, it can cascade quite a bit and cause a lot of issues later on. Beatrix 2 hits us with a slightly delayed shock, which slows down the fight a little bit, but we still get her in the end. Prison cage swing can be quite difficult to time when blindfolded, but a metronome helps us time our swing. Thanks to taking the fight in Garganru, we're able to kill the guards really easily on the escape, after which we regroup with our party and make our way upstairs. Looting the Ice Brand gives Steiner some much needed power for the next few boss fight. Next, in the Zorn and Thorn fight, we focus on Zorn as his health pool is a little bit lower before we make our way back up the stairs to fight with Beatrix 3. Beatrix 3 has a lot of speed, so it's really important that we just queue our abilities as quickly as possible. Steiner is still our primary damage dealer, so we'll be leaving most of the damage to him. Next, we have a few forced encounters with some Bandersnatchers and some more Black Mages, which we tooled out our team to deal with quite quickly. Before the sequence finishes, we pray that Beatrix is able to get Clem Hazard off on the dogs before they take down Freya. To finish the sequence, we get into the fight with Daddy Ralph. The only thing to be careful here is Soundwave, which if it happens, I just have to hope that it isn't on Zidane and Vivi, and if it is, then unfortunately I'll have to reset before the fight. Soon after, we regroup in Lindblum, where we do a really quick shop to buy an exploder before we make our way back down to Q's Mark. Here, we recruit Quinna into our party before we head on down to Fossil Ruin. With Armored Dullahan chasing us, we dodge the axes and move on through to fight Lani. We take down Lani using Zidane's attacks and Vivi's Blazzaras. Running through Fossil Ruin, not forgetting to pick up the extra little Stiltskin package, we finally make it to the outer continent. Using our setup and a little bit of patience, we're able to make our way to the Chocobo tracks before going straight to Conde PD. After hitting some essential story triggers, we then take our Chocobos straight down to Black Mage Village, where we perform a fairly big shop and another synth. The final major part of overworld movement for this disc is taking the Chocobo straight back up to Conde PD. From here, Iiko joins our party, and we use Hill Pass to make our way to Hilgagast. As long as Zidane and Vivi don't go down in this fight, it's fairly simple, as we use Iiko to support and the other two to deal damage. We make our way to Medain Sare, where we mash text boxes for a fair few minutes. After travelling back across Hill Pass, we make our way to the Iifa tree. Fortunately, Iifa isn't too much of a problem, as half of the random encounters can be dealt with in one turn, and only one of the screens provides a problem with navigation. We have two short forced encounters on the elevator, with Vivi and Iiko using AoE spells to clear them quickly. After which is a forced Draco zombie encounter, which I'm particularly scared of zombie breath with, so I throw in an elixir to make sure that it doesn't get a turn. Finally, in the Iifa tree, we have one more menu to complete before we get into the fight with Soul Cage, where we use life to finish it off. We then head back across Hill Pass again to get back to Medain Sare, where we find Lani being mean to children. We then enter a forced boss battle with Amarant, with a lucky crit to help us finish him off early. A few text boxes later, Amarant joins our party, and then we make our way back to Iifa tree once again. We enter into the final sequence of Disc 2 taking down a few Mastodons for some much needed EXP and AP. After a few more minutes of cutscenes, CD2 finally comes to an end. Our first objective of Disc 3 is trying not to fall asleep, as we mash through about 20 minutes of dialogue, only very briefly visiting a synth shop. Once all the dialogue is finally done, we appear in Treno and we go and play in the card tournament. The first thing to do is to make a save, then we can take on the first round. With thanks to my latent psychic ability and blue text boxes, we actually go 3-0 in the tournament and secure the rebirth ring. Just kidding, we were here quite a while. After each loss, we reset and reloaded the save to try again. Each time you lose in cards, you lose a card, and we can't really afford to keep losing cards until we have none left. The rebirth ring is also really important for consistency's sake and is going to help us out a lot in Disc 4. Before we can begin the Mastodon invasion, we need to direct the Knights of Pluto to the correct task in order to be rewarded with the Angel Earrings. Taking some of Beatrix's gear and giving it to Steiner sets us up for this segment. I wasn't able to skip the first Mastodon, but was able to skip the second one. After a quick heal, we take down the rest of the Mastodons one by one. Shortly after, we clear about 1 million more text boxes and don't get to watch the cool cutscenes as we grind our way through the rest of Disc 3's opening. Once that's all over, we're finally rewarded with the worst part of the game, navigating the Disc 3 overworld. We use a metronome to get the boat to the Forgotten Continent, from where we follow a setup to get back to Ku's Marsh, so that afterwards we can get to a Chocobo's track, so that then we can take the Chocobo's track to Black Mage Village, engaging in even more text box clearing, before finally getting back on the Chocobo, finding our way back to the boat, doing some more metronome navigation, and arriving on the other side of the outer continent. From here, some more setups takes us to just outside of Kuja's palace. At the time, I wasn't aware that my setup was actually completely wrong, but I found a way to get to Kuja's palace after reloading from the save anyway. I make sure to select the correct party to take into Iifa before arriving in the first Hildegarde screen. This has been the graveyard for all of my previous runs. I had never gotten a run through this area without some kind of issues, and the issue that I run into during this run is that I miscalculate and I end up accidentally turning level up off of Freya when it should be on. What's more is the next piece of overworld movement is even worse than the other overworld movement we've done previously. Overall, I spent more than an hour trying to get to Iifa in real time. Upon arriving at Iifa, I was able to perform the shop correctly and navigate Iifa without a problem. But not having level up on Freya meant that she didn't earn enough crystals to equip all of the abilities that I wanted her to, and I spent a further 40 minutes trying to figure out what was wrong. My issue is that counter was not able to be equipped, and while counter isn't essential, it really helps to have everything in the correct place. Eventually I just concede, and I hope that not having counter on isn't the cause of a bigger problem. Spoilers. It was. Fortunately, the only major thing about Arc is to ensure that everyone's got clear-headed equipped, which was the case. Throwing Silver Forks and a Diamond Sword with Amaran, and attacking with Zidane and Freya is enough to deal lethal damage to Arc. There's just one more small, very crucial menu that you perform immediately before picking up the Gulug Stone. The first time I did it, I actually wasn't confident in my menu, and I reset and I fought Arc again. This time, I get the menu correctly, and we move on to Desert Palace. Desert Palace begins with taking control of Sid for the Hedgehog Pie minigame, which looks a lot cooler when you don't know the trick to simplifying the minigame. The minigame is simple red light, green light, press circle when he's not looking at you, and stop pressing when he is looking at you. The problem here is that there is only a sound effect for when he turns to look at you and not when he turns away. In testing, we found out that Hedgehog Pie can only look at you for a maximum of 4 seconds at a time. So as long as you wait at least 4 seconds from hearing the sound effect, then you know that he has to have turned back around again. Sometimes you'll hear him turn to look at you within 4 seconds though, and if that happens then you have to start counting again. I start Desert Palace by saving it, doing a small menu, and then promptly getting it wrong. I then reload back in and get it right the second time. Navigating Desert Palace itself is a bit of a pain, but with a few setups, we managed to get most of it done. My issue is that I didn't activate one of the candles on the path behind one of the moving bookshelves. This meant that I made it all the way to the boss and couldn't activate the boss fight itself. I then proceed to spend about 50 minutes absolutely losing my mind, not even knowing if I can continue. I try a number of things before finally finding that I can move the bookshelf back again. With the torch lit, I'm able to save it and move on with the run. Another short menu then sets up my party for the boss fight. Valley Apira only becomes complicated if he gets in front of our party. Luckily, Iiko is fast enough to cast Carbuncle and put Reflect on all of my party members, effectively rendering them invincible. By casting water across my entire party, it's reflected on the boss and does 50% of his HP. Do another one and Valley Apira is dead. Now we regroup with our other party coming back from Iifa. Traversing over this screen 2 more times, we need to take 2 more encounters. We're only looking to take encounters of single ogres, as double ogre encounters can be quite threatening. On the way back, we get a stray trance on Zidane, then they kill him, and before I can figure out what's happened, they end up game overing my party. This means we have to do Valley of Pyrrha one more time, as well as the Hildegard 2 and 3 screens. Finally, with all this behind us, we can leave Hildegard 3 and make our way to the Forgotten Continent. Upon arrival, I accidentally picked the correct team, but in the wrong order. We do a really small shop in Estogaza for some new gear, before descending Mount Gullug to a save point below. This is where I realised that there's something wrong with my party, and eventually I realised they're just in the wrong order. Putting them back into the right order, I finally get a menu in Disc 3 correct. The Red Dragons fight is really dangerous if Zidane does not get in front of one of them. Twister is able to deal lots of damage really quickly, but if we can use Soul Blade with Zidane, we can confuse one of them. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen first try, and they just kill Zidane. On the second try though, we get them down. I wanted to make sure that only Zidane and Steiner were alive, as the Red Dragons give a lot of experience. Coupled with level up, we gain a lot of levels really fast. Climbing back up the rope, I go back to the save point one more time before I do my menu getting ready for Melty Gemini. With our setup, Zidane and Steiner can deal lots of damage really quickly with attack, and Amarant can deal some damage throwing Rising Suns. We get our trance here and we end the fight really quickly with Zidane. After the Melty Gemini fight, there's about 10 minutes more of mashing dialogue. The first thing to happen next is to select your party for Ibsen's castle, which I get wrong, and I have to then fight Melty and mash through all the text boxes again. The first airship section to get to Ibsen's is in a straight line, so with the help of the metronome, I know how far I've gone and I can stop outside of Ibsen's. Inside of Ibsen's, we save it one more time, do another quick shop, followed by another menu to set us up for Tahaka. Navigating through Ibsen's castle, we finally make it to Tahaka. Tahaka relentlessly casts Berserker. This is quite rare for him, but by utilising Zidane's Soul Blade to inflict poison and Faragas with Vivi, I can make sure that everyone's alive at the end and everyone gets their AP. Once I get back outside the castle, there's one more decent sized menu to make sure that everyone's set up for the You Are Not Alone sequence. One last trip inside of Ibsen's castle to find Amarant as I navigate getting back out again using a few setups. My next task is to make it to the 4 Guardian Shrines. The Water Shrine is immediately in front, whereas the Fire Shrine requires a little bit more of an elaborate setup to find. The Wind Shrine is a little bit more technical, but we still get it in one go. Then finally, we can use the map to get us a little bit closer to the Earth Shrine, and we can take it from there. The Earth Guardian is the next boss, and with Zidane's loadout, it goes down in 6 hits, after which we can use Quina's Eat ability to learn Earthshake and end the fight early. After Earth Guardian, we pick our party for Terra, in which I forget that Quina is in slot 4 and mess it up. Then we fight Earth Guardian one more time before we can move on to Terra. I was hoping that we might find a Hectize in Terra, as the extra EXP yields 1 extra level up on Zidane, and therefore a little bit more health to help with the Death Guys fight in the end of Disc 4. Eventually we find one, and by casting Life with Ico, we kill it in 1 hit, and reap the benefits. Before my party is split up one more time, I do one last menu before You Are Not Alone. There's a little bit more mashing going on in Bramble now, before we take control of Ico and do another quick small shop. Taking control of Zidane in Pandemonium, we set him up for the You Are Not Alone segment. This segment, You Are Not Alone, is a gauntlet of 3 fights. First up is Murder Horse. Murder Horse can't quite die straight away. Either you need to wait for some time to pass, or to drop Zidane into critical HP. This route doesn't use auto life, so instead I wait for Freya to come in. Once she arrives, you still can't kill the mighty Murder Horse, but instead, dealing it lethal damage will bring Amarant into the fight. Once everyone's here, I have Zidane suicide, and Amarant finish it off with a wing edge. Next up is Abaddon, facing down Steiner and Quina. After just 2 turns, Zidane is going to turn up, so we just need to survive. Putting Steiner into the back row actually skips a little bit of dialogue here, and gives him a little bit of protection too. It's also important to make sure that Quina doesn't survive, so they don't suck up any of the experience. The final fight is with Shell Dragon, who won't let us progress the fight until Zidane enters critical HP. Normally in this fight we can use Flee to manipulate how much damage Zidane takes on each turn, but because we don't have that privilege, I just choose to defend and wait for Shell Dragon to smash Zidane into critical HP. Once Dagger arrives, we can then finally finish the fight. Again, it's important to make sure that Dagger doesn't survive so Zidane gets all of the experience. The next menu is the last one of Disc 3 and the biggest menu in the run. I have to sell off everything that isn't coming with me to Disc 4. I'm going to need the money to buy some last minute gear and then dump the rest of it into high potions and Phoenix Downs. With all of that wrapped up, there's one final boss rush left on the disc. The first up is Silver Dragon, where we pray for no shockwave. Having teammates go down early can be quite an issue, but luckily Silver goes down without a problem. Garland is the second boss in the rush, who opens by stopping my party, but I choose to ignore it and just keep attacking anyway. I recognise that Freya's gone down, but assume at this point she actually has auto life turned on. Garland goes down the next turn and I don't quite realise that she's still dead. Going into Kuja with 3 alive, eventually I realise that someone's not quite alive. Despite this, a bit of slugging later and some Phoenix downs, we managed to take Kuja out. There is one final gameplay sequence of fleeing from terror while it explodes, as we finally make it out of Disc 3. Nova is the first fight of Disc 4, and with a really high speed stat, he can very quickly run away with a fight. Psychokinesis is guaranteed to kill either Freya or Amaran and do considerable damage to both Steiner and Zidane. These kind of openers are pretty hard to react to anyway, and when I started losing turn to Nova, he punished me even harder with a shockwave. The next fight goes much better, giving us the ideal opener to activate Luna, enraging our party with the intention of killing Nova before he kills us. During the encounter, I hear a trance activate. Considering that Freya hasn't tranced yet, and Zidane only tranced on Melty Gemini, I just assumed that it was Freya. And while this doesn't change much right now, don't worry, I'll be in for a big surprise later. Aside from that, the fight goes perfectly and we finally get to Memoria, and with that, despair. My menu is working flawlessly except for Freya. Everyone else has all of the gear and abilities that I'm expecting, but I still can't quite figure out why Freya isn't quite working correctly. I make my way to Malaris anyway, expecting Autolife to get me through her party-wide attack that she performs when she dies. Unfortunately, Autolife wasn't enabled and I game over. Confused, I tried to remedy Freya's menu and it's sure at least Autolife is on. Upon returning to the fight, I then soon realised that Autolife still is not on. Back to the drawing board. Panic ensues and I begin to wonder if I accidentally sold the Rebirth Ring. So I try removing everyone's accessories and giving Freya priority. My hope is that the optimised feature will prioritise Rebirth Ring back onto Freya and that I could finally equip Autolife. Unfortunately, still no dice. Finally, with my back to the wall, I concede to just playing with rebirthless strategies. We're going to back Zidane, stifling his damage output, and try and put him in a defensive stance after the second turn. This way, he should be able to survive Reading Swords and get us through the fight. Finally, we're able to pull through. I pick everyone up and I make my way to the next save point before moving on to Tiamat. Right before Tiamat, once again, I have a slight issue with Freya, but luckily I was able to guess where Dragon Killer was and get that equipped. The Tiamat fight goes rather well for the first few turns, but eventually after a twister I spend a little bit of time picking everyone back up so I can get back into the fight. If a character performs an action on Tiamat while afflicted by the float ability, they'll get snorted and removed from battle permanently. I hear this ability go off, but decide that he's probably nearly dead anyway and just pushed for lethal. With Tiamat dead, we only have 2 Chaos Guardians to go until Excalibur 2. With a quick visit to the save sphere just before Kraken, I once again notice that Freya's menus still aren't quite working out. Because Freya didn't survive Malaris like she should have done, she hasn't learnt Devil Killer, meaning she'll be dealing a lot less damage. At this point, I just execute the menu as I have it memorized and hope it works out. A number of abilities end up incorrect for Freya, and Zidane ends up with auto regen instead of auto life for Kraken. The fight opens poorly, and I use Detect with Zidane on the boss instead of attacking. Freya also gets frozen, but eventually she falls out. Once both of the tentacles are finally down, Kraken is pretty much limited to just using Waterger, which Freya and Steiner are both completely immune to. At this point, the strategy is quite simple. Freya is going to PD Zidane, Steiner is going to charge everyone in, Kraken is then going to Waterger and only kill Zidane, and then we do it all again until Kraken dies. Coming up, my only concern for Lich at this point is that Freya isn't equipped with Autoflow. One of the ways that we manage this fight is having Autoflow on both Steiner and Freya. This way they can both evade Earthquake and it will only take out Amaran on the first hit. I was also blissfully unaware that Freya was lacking any MP for her MP attack ability, but this bit isn't much of an issue. Despite all of this, I put Fear aside and just take him on regardless. Lich opens with Stop, which is particularly bad if it's on Steiner, and then the first round of attacks reveals that it was Steiner that was stopped. The following Earthquake then throws a huge wrench in my plans and forces me to start using Phoenix Downs. Eventually I stabilise the fight and a level 5 death informs me that Lich is taking a turn off. Up until this point, our experience points have been distributed very carefully to ensure that nobody gets hit by level 5 death. I'm able to identify Zidane and finally get a remedy off on Steiner to cure Stop. Holding ATB lets me get Steiner in on the same turn, and a Phoenix Down with Freya completely pulls me back into the fight. With Lich down, I'm finally rewarded with Excalibur 2. Now there are only 3 bosses left between me and the end of the run. I make it through Crystal World and definitely save it before doing anything else. By this point, my menus are mostly out of sync and I've given up trying to get things in the right place. From here on out, I'm just using my experience to get me through the thick of it and hoping what abilities are equipped are enough. One final ability menu for our team before Death Guys, where I just give up even trying with Freya. At this point, I can afford to extend my fights a little and deal with her lower damage output. I pray a silent prayer to RN Jesus and ask for a meteor that doesn't just completely kill me. And on this day, the gods answered. Death Guys is a very common place for a speedrun to be killed on. The strategy in this fight is to have Zidane backroad and provide support to Steiner with all of the elixirs that we've gathered until this point. Steiner, with his new Excalibur 2 and a Mithril Helm to provide holy damage boost, is able to deal max damage per swing. When Death Guys uses his close ability, then we can pick up Amaran, who can begin throwing wing edges as well. With their combined effort, enough damage is dealt and Death Guys finally goes down first try. Trance Kuja is the only thing standing between us and the final boss. I give up on menus and give my teammates the consumables I can and just get stuck in. Trance Kuja's mechanic is that once he receives damage over 50% of his health pool, he begins countering with devastating area effect spells. Charge is really important here. By using charge, we're triggering the game's counter mechanic on our critical allies. Because the game doesn't let a counter attack trigger another counter attack, Trance Kuja can't respond with Flare Star. A couple more Phoenix Downs later and plenty of charging and we're on to the final boss, Necron. Now, Necron usually follows a very simple plan during a normal run, but this relies on your party being correctly equipped, and at this point I am certain that that is not the case. So instead I decide to employ a different strategy. We're gonna go solo Freya, at least for most of the fight. Necron has a weird pattern to the way that he fights you. He can only cast black and white magic spells if you control a party member in white HP. We can work against this by allowing him to put us into critical HP and having the rest of our party members kill themselves off as soon as possible. Necron's script will make him cast Blue Shockwave once, followed by Grand Cross. If Grand Cross connects, the run dies as he will follow up with the ability Neutron Ring, which will do way more damage than we're set up to deal with. The strategy requires us to use Freya's jump ability to avoid Grand Cross entirely. No Grand Cross, no Neutron Ring. When we come back down, Necron will Blue Shockwave 3 times and then Grand Cross again. Like before, if Grand Cross happens, Neutron Ring follows up. But the problem that we have is that Freya's trance ability causes her to jump and stay in the air for longer than normal. The airtime depends entirely on her remaining trance gauge and her total spirit value. I'm sure this is a lot to take in if you're unfamiliar, but basically, it's 3 Blue Shockwaves, then we need to jump over Grand Cross, rinse and repeat. Please enjoy the final fight.
What?
Surprise, motherfucker.
You were so confident.
His eyes just bursted out of the bandana. This is a very fitting end.
I can hear the gears turning.
I was just gonna
Send
say
it.
that.
Fucking send it!
Oh god. You know the funny thing is, having eyes here literally doesn't help.
I just love that you were so confident that it was Freya the Trance.
Alright, that's Boo Shockwave 2. BS1?
BS7.
BS2? Please? Oh my god!
Gaming Warlord.
Nice job, dude.
BS1. PS2. PS3. One. Assist me! PS2.
Oh my god, that actually happened. Wow. G fucking G.
They win?
G, yeah, time.
I would like to give a huge thanks to my commentary team that helped me manage my chat during this run. They did an absolutely awesome job helping me interact and have been brilliant supporting me through figuring out all of this rubbish. I've included all of them in the description below. Please give them a follow if you use Twitch. The entire run is also available on my Twitch page, and there is a YouTube link in the description with all of the breaks removed. I had a lot of fun figuring this mess out, and as sad as I am for not taking a flawless set of menus to the end, I cannot see myself trying this again. Thank you so much for watching.